2.7 is going to be a summary of everything we've done so far in Chapter 2. They're going to make it slightly more difficult because they're going to use decimals. So the first thing we're going to do is get away from variables and just practice our decimals a little bit here. So we're going to remind ourselves how to find a sum. Now, because we have a negative 2.9 and a negative 6.5, we're going to use the rule of adding numbers with the same sign. So when we're adding numbers with the same sign, we keep the sign, so we're going to get a negative, and we go ahead and add. And when we're adding this, we're going to get a negative 9.4. Now, find the difference. We're going to make sure we rewrite it as a sum. There is no rule for subtraction except for to add the opposite. So now I'm going to have a negative 25.38, and I'm going to add a positive 42, or combine it with a positive 42.734. So we're going to use our rule of adding numbers with different signs. If they have different signs, we find the difference. So you would put into your calculator the 42.734, and you would find the difference subtracting 25.38, and then you're going to give them the sign of the larger one, and the larger would be positive. So the difference between those two numbers are going to be 17.354. Again, make sure you're applying the rules because sometimes just doing the buttons on the calculator has caused you some difficulty. So let's go ahead and do a couple of these practices. A negative and a negative is going to give you a negative. Now you can go ahead and just do addition, and it's going to be 5.5. We have a positive and a negative, so we have different signs. We're going to find the difference, and plugging that into the calculator, we're going to get the bigger number is the 10, so it's going to be a positive 3.68. And this time we have a positive, but we have a subtraction, so we're going to change it to add the opposite. Now we have two positives, same sign. We're going to just go ahead and add them, give them the sign that they share, which is positive, so I don't have to write it, it's implied, and we get an 11.307. Remember, if you're doing these manually and not using a calculator, you need to, in addition and subtraction, you need to line up your decimal points. Now we're going to do a little review of multiplying and dividing decimals. And again, remember the integer rules. We don't have variables yet, we're just dealing with integers. So in the first one, we have a positive and a negative. We're going to get a negative then, and our answer is going to be a negative 21.08. Now, if you're doing this manually, you do not have to line up your decimals, but you do have to count, and if you're from my class, we call them dinks, how many decimal places that we have. In the next one, we have a negative divided by a negative. So if it's a negative and a negative, it's going to give us a positive. I'm going to write that just to reinforce it, but you do not have to write that positive. It is simply implied. And so the answer to this one is going to be 16.3. And remembering the rules for this one, we have a negative divided by a positive. So we have different signs. That's going to give us a negative. And that answer is going to be a negative 7.3. So I'm just applying the rules. Then I can go ahead and put it into the calculator. Now we're going to throw in some variables. So we need to do balanced equations again. So I need to get x by itself. Right now we're adding a 4.7. So I'm going to subtract 4.7 from both sides. These are going to cancel out, leaving me with just my variable on that side. I have a positive and a negative, so I'm going to find the difference. So I'm going to put the larger on the top, and I'm going to end up with 7 minus 5 is 2, 4 minus 3 is 1, and my larger of those numbers was a negative. Whoops, sorry, for some reason it doesn't like that when I try to throw that in at the end. And so we're going to have, for that one, we're going to have a negative 1.2. It'll let me, oh, that's not a good one. That's up there too high. Okay, negative 1.2. In our next one, we have our variable and it's having something subtracted from it. So we're going to go ahead and add to both sides. Do that inverse operation. Those are going to cancel out, leaving us with just the variable on that side. We have a negative and a positive, so we're going to find the difference and give the sign of the larger. So it's going to be a positive, and that one turns out to be a 4.65. Again, we have some addition and subtraction. I'm going to skip that. It's just a repeat. Addition and subtraction again. And let's move to the multiplication and division. This time I have negative 0.6m equals negative 5.1. So my m is being multiplied, so I need to divide both sides. That will leave me with just m on that side. If I divide this side by a negative, a positive divided by a negative is going to give me a negative. And 5.1 divided by negative 0.6 is going to give me, oops, I didn't see my negative here, sorry. Negative 5.1 divided by negative 0.6. So that's going to give me a positive instead. I'm going to erase that just so it doesn't look like one of my sloppy ones. So we end up with a negative divided by a negative is going to give me a positive, and that answer is 8.5. My division one, to review that, n divided by negative 8. So to get rid of the dividing, I'm going to multiply both sides by a negative 8. Those are going to cancel each other out. We're going to have n, and 1.75 positive multiplied by a negative is going to give me a negative, and that's going to give me a negative 14. More reviews with multiplying and dividing, and that finishes off our lesson for 2.7 and for the chapter.